In early 19th century Britain, the real war was with Napoleon. All resources, attention and anxiety were focused on Europe, not the distant troubles with America. The War of 1812, when it came, was seen as an annoying distraction, a sideshow that diverted ships and men from the existential fight against France. While Americans and Canadians would later see this conflict as nation-defining, in Britain it was barely a footnote, remembered mostly for the burning of Washington. For British leaders in 1812, it was simply a second front to be managed, not a war to be won at all costs. The roots of the conflict lay in our struggle with Napoleon. For years, Britain had been locked in a titanic struggle with France, a battle not just for dominance in Europe, but for the fate of empires across the globe. Every decision we made was shaped by the shadow of Napoleon's ambitions and the threat he posed to our very existence. To defeat France, we imposed the orders in council, restricting neutral trade, including American with the continent. These measures were not taken lightly. They were designed to choke off supplies to Napoleon and weaken his war machine. Yet in doing so, we inevitably disrupted the livelihoods of countless neutral merchants, especially those from the young United States, whose ships now found themselves ensnared in the crossfire of European power politics. American merchants were caught between our blockades and French seizures, but we saw their complaints as secondary to defeating Napoleon. Their ships, cargoes, and even their sailors became pawns in a much larger game. While Americans protested the loss of their goods and the violation of their rights, we believed that the survival of Britain and the balance of power in Europe was at stake. Impressment was another flashpoint, and one that would ignite even greater anger across the Atlantic. The Royal Navy, desperate for sailors, forcibly reclaimed British deserters from American ships, often mistakenly taking Americans as well. Our Navy was the backbone of our defense, and with so many men deserting to American vessels, we felt compelled to act. The lines between British subjects and American citizens blurred on the high seas, leading to tragic misunderstandings and bitter resentment. We insisted, once a subject, always a subject, refusing to recognize American naturalization. To us, allegiance to the crown was a lifelong bond, not something that could be cast aside by crossing an ocean or signing a document. This rigid stance only deepened the divide, fueling American outrage and suspicion. Meanwhile, we armed Native American tribes in the Great Lakes, hoping to create a buffer against US expansion and protect our Canadian colonies. These alliances were strategic, meant to safeguard our interests in North America and to check the relentless push of American settlers westward. For the tribes, British support offered a chance to resist displacement, but for Americans, it was seen as a hostile act. These policies infuriated Americans, but for us, they were wartime necessities. Every blockade, every act of impressment, every alliance with native peoples was a calculated move in a desperate struggle for survival. We weighed the costs, but the needs of the empire always tipped the scales. The needs of empire and survival always came first. In the grand chessboard of global conflict, every colony, every ship, every soldier mattered. We could not afford to show weakness, not when the fate of continents hung in the balance. The seeds of war were sown in the collision of these priorities. As British interests clashed with American aspirations, mistrust and resentment grew. The choices we made, driven by necessity and survival, would ultimately set two nations on a path toward open conflict, a struggle that would shape the destiny of a continent. When America declared war in June 1812, London was hardly surprised. Relations had been souring for months. Ironically, just 2 days before the declaration, Britain had agreed to suspend the hated orders in council. But news crossed the Atlantic too slowly to prevent war. Both sides stumbled into conflict neither truly wanted. victims of slow communication and mutual frustration. Britain's strategy was defensive: hold Canada, blockade the US coast, and avoid major offensives. The real fight, we believed, was still in Europe. North America was a sideshow, not the main event. The Americans expected an easy conquest of Canada, but their invasions in 1812 ended in disaster. Poorly led and ill-prepared, US forces were outmaneuvered by British regulars, Canadian militia, and native allies. At Detroit, General Brock and Tecumseh bluffed General Hull into surrendering without a fight, a humiliating American defeat. At Queenston Heights, the Americans failed again. Brock was killed, but his troops and Mohawk warriors repelled the invaders. The myth of a mere matter of marching was shattered. Canadian resistance, British leadership, and native alliances proved formidable. The US invasion collapsed, and the war in the north became a bloody stalemate. Canada would not be conquered so easily. While the US Navy scored surprising victories at sea, these battles, though dramatic, were only part of a much larger struggle. The true heart of the conflict lay not on the open ocean, but on the vast interconnected waters of the Great Lakes. Here, the fate of entire armies and the future of the continent would be decided. The real naval struggle was on the Great Lakes, where control of these waters meant far more than just military prestige. Whoever commanded the lakes could move troops, transport supplies, and dictate the pace and direction of the war in the West. Control of these waters meant control of supply lines and the fate of armies. The lakes became lifelines, and every ship, every skirmish could tip the balance. Both sides raced to build fleets, often constructing warships in remote shipyards under harsh conditions, knowing that a single defeat could spell disaster for their cause. In 1813, the Americans won a decisive victory at Lake Erie, a turning point that shifted momentum. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry's triumph was not just a tactical win, it shattered British naval power on the lakes and opened the way for American advances. The British, now vulnerable, were forced to abandon Detroit and retreat northward. Their withdrawal was hasty and desperate, leaving behind supplies and positions they had fought hard to secure. The retreat ended in disaster at the Battle of the Thames, where British and native forces made a final stand. The battle was fierce, but ultimately the British line broke, and their native allies suffered devastating losses. It was here that Tecumseh, the visionary Shawnee leader, was killed. His death was a crushing blow not only to his people but to the fragile native confederacy he had worked so hard to build. Without his leadership, unity among the tribes quickly unraveled. With Tecumseh's death, our alliance with native tribes disintegrated. The hopes for a powerful native coalition, able to resist American expansion, faded almost overnight. The British, now isolated, could no longer count on their most important allies in the West. The British lost a vital ally, and the Western Front unraveled. The collapse of the alliance left British forces exposed and demoralized, while American forces pressed their advantage, reshaping the balance of power in the region. The war's early promise of a united native buffer state, a vision of a homeland protected from American encroachment, vanished with Tecumseh's fall. The dream of a lasting native presence between the US and Canada was lost. It was a bitter betrayal and a turning point in the conflict, marking the end of an era for native resistance and forever altering the course of the war on the western frontier. With Napoleon defeated in 1814, Britain could finally send battle-hardened veterans to North America. Thousands of Wellington's men arrived, shifting the war's momentum. The plan: invade New York from Canada, raid the American coast, and seize New Orleans. For the first time, the US faced a full-scale British offensive. The Americans, once confident of conquering Canada, now braced for invasion. The war's character changed. No longer a defensive holding action, but a campaign of retribution. Britain was ready to bring the war home to America. In August 1814, British troops landed on the shores of Maryland, their red uniforms a stark warning to the American defenders. The War of 1812 had reached a critical point, and the British, emboldened by recent victories in Europe, now turned their full attention to the young United States. Their goal was clear: to strike at the very heart of American government and morale. The British force, numbering over 4,000, marched relentlessly toward Washington, D.C., encountering little resistance as they advanced through the countryside. Panic spread among the city's residents as news of the approaching army reached the capital. At the Battle of Bladensburg, American defenders were quickly overwhelmed and forced to retreat in disarray. With the city left virtually unprotected, British troops entered Washington with little opposition, and the fate of the capital was sealed. British soldiers set fire to the Capitol, the President's mansion, now known as the White House, and other key public buildings. The flames lit up the night sky, a fiery act of retaliation for the American burning of York in Canada the previous year. The destruction was swift and devastating, leaving the city in ruins. The burning of Washington shocked the nation and sent waves of disbelief across the country. For Americans, it was a moment of deep humiliation and fear, a sign that their young nation was vulnerable. For the British, however, it was a calculated act of retribution, meant to send a powerful message. After just 26 hours, the British withdrew from the smoldering city, turning their sights north toward Baltimore. The march to Baltimore was swift, as the British hoped to capitalize on their momentum and deal another blow to American morale. But in Baltimore, the story changed. American defenders, determined not to let another city fall, prepared strong fortifications at Fort McHenry and along the city's ramparts. The citizens and soldiers of Baltimore stood ready, united in defense. The British launched a fierce bombardment on Fort McHenry, but the defenders held firm through the night. The attack ultimately failed, marking a turning point in the campaign. During the fighting, British General Robert Ross was killed, a blow to British leadership and morale. His death, along with the failed assault, marked the limits of British reach on American soil. The defense of Fort McHenry inspired Francis Scott Key to write The Star-Spangled Banner, a song that would become the American national anthem and a lasting symbol of American resilience. With the burning of Washington and the defense of Baltimore, the war's most famous moments had passed. Both sides now faced an uncertain future, forever changed by the events of 1814. The main British invasion from Canada stalled after defeat at Plattsburgh Bay, where American naval control forced a retreat. Combined with setbacks at Baltimore, it became clear that conquering the US would be costly and likely futile. War weariness gripped Britain. Peace became more attractive than further fighting. Negotiations in Ghent led to a simple agreement. Both sides would return to pre-war borders, ignoring the issues that started the conflict. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in December 1814, ended the war with no territorial changes. Ironically, the bloody Battle of New Orleans was fought after peace had already been agreed. The war ended as it began, marked by miscommunication and missed opportunities. Militarily, the War of 1812 was a draw. Neither side achieved its main aims. For Americans, it became a second war of independence, forging national pride and identity. For Canadians, it was a moment of unity and resistance, shaping their own sense of nationhood. For Native Americans, it was a tragedy. The loss of Tecumseh and the collapse of their Confederacy left them vulnerable to US expansion. In Britain, the war was quickly forgotten, overshadowed by Waterloo and the rise of empire. There are no monuments in London. The war remains a historical footnote. Ultimately, the War of 1812 mattered far more to others than it ever did to us.